probably remember the hit show Family Guy, don't we? To refresh your memory, it's about the Griffin family of Quahog. The family consists of Peter, Lois, Chris, Meg, Stewie, and their pet dog, Brian, going on wacky adventures. The show ran all the way until the present day, going into a 22nd season still airing. What many people don't know is something that still remains to be an open secret between the Fox executives and the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane. In Seth's case, it seems like there was something bothering him after Family Guy was conceived. This thing, or whatever's bothering him, wasn't evident from the get-go, but as the seasons went by, it started becoming more clear to the Fox executives. This all happened when Seth created one of the show's most famous and infamous characters. That character was Peter Griffin. The way I can safely describe Peter is like this. Peter is the kind of character that has the most mixed feelings about by fans and critics alike. In the earlier seasons, Peter was a dim-witted but still reasonable husband and father who gets into trouble most of the time. However, in the later episodes, Peter's behavior had begun to take a drastic change for the worse. Throughout the later seasons of Family Guy's run, Peter is shown to be doing multiple heinous crimes that could get him locked up if he were to imitate these crimes in real life. Notable examples include starting his own comic strip business and writing an offensive strip, shooting Cleveland's son in the arm, etc. During this character flanderization of Peter, many Family Guy fans and critics have started writing angry letters to the Fox executives, but more notably, started sending them to none other than Seth himself. The letters ranged from negative feedback surrounding Peter Griffin's character and personality now than what he was in the previous seasons, while others threatened Seth to kill Peter off of the show for good. Seth, initially skeptical and brushing the whole thing off as a joke, ignored these letters and continued with working on different episodes. However, the letters had begun to grow more and more negative, and many angry fans of Family Guy had begun to publicly humiliate and shame Seth in real life, shunning and angrily yelling at him for still keeping Peter on the show. The letters kept persisting, and had begun to grow worse with each passing moment. It all led to a breaking point for Seth, as he was caught into a difficult and uneasy decision that had to be resolved immediately to relieve his stress. Then, one day, Seth came to Fox and announced his intentions on making his very own episode of Family Guy, with the help of his friends and colleagues, an episode that would hopefully put an end to the constant harassment. What many of them didn't know, however, was that Seth was planning on reworking an episode that was already in the development stages. The episode that was in development at the time was tentatively named Family Guy Behind the Scenes, where it revealed that Family Guy was a show within a show, hosted by a Twilight Show-esque narrator in a style similar to a documentary. It also showed that all the characters you know and loved and hated are the actors of this said show. The episode, under Seth's wishes, had its title changed to The Big Goal. Let's all go back to that oh-so-familiar year of 2016, shall we? It was a fine summer evening, and Family Guy was in its 15th season at the time. However, something strange happened during this quiet summer evening. At 7 p.m., many locals were watching their television. The channel that they were watching was Adult Swim, and it was playing a rerun of Futurama. This is where things get a little strange and peculiar to ignore. The Futurama episode that was airing at the time just stopped. Yep. You heard me correctly. The episode of Futurama that was playing just stopped abruptly, just as the credits were about to roll. Many viewers were left confused by this sudden abruption that they thought it was just their TV systems malfunctioning. No matter what they did, whether that's unplugging the set and plugging it back in, tampering with the remote, changing sources, the TVs in that area just stayed frozen. After a few seconds, their TV sets immediately went completely black. Not just a temporary black like what happens during thunderstorms when the satellite quality gets all fuzzy and distorted. This was a permanent darkness of black. Soon, white text slowly began to fade in on their TV screens. Here's a transcription of the text that followed this sudden intrusion of broadcast television. Hello, America. This is Seth MacFarlane, creator of Family Guy, American Dad, and The Cleveland Show. I have read your feedback on one of your most coveted characters that I have voiced for the past 17 years. I have felt pressured into making this sudden announcement for the fans who still watch the Griffin's shenanigans on television. What you're about to see is something that I wanted to get off my chest and work on, as this sort of hatred for one of my characters began skyrocketing. This is not a temporary killing off situation like what happened to Brian back in season 12. This is a permanent thing. Why am I talking about this? This is because after many fan requests and demands, Peter Griffin, one of the show's infamous characters, will be killed off in this special broadcast for all the continent to see. To the many of you still keeping that hatred of Peter Griffin during the last few seasons of Family Guy, I have one question to ask you. The text temporarily faded out for a while, before coming back reading, "Are you happy now?" The text immediately faded back out, and that familiar black intermission seen previously before came back. After a few seconds, the TV systems immediately began resonating with a loud sonorous beep that sounded akin to that of the dial tone usually heard in telephones. The sound came from every single housing area in the US. The sound was also heard by a few passers-by as well. After what seemed like minutes of this resonating beep, white text started to fade in on the darkness, being the only thing visible on many TV screens. The text now said, this time in a big bold font, "Family Guy, the big goal." Several white flashes then came onto the screen without any given warning, startling most of the viewers watching this sudden broadcast intrusion. After the flashes stopped, it showed the Griffin house during the day with the normal cheery music playing. It showed the interior of the house, where the whole family is shown sitting in the living room, where they are watching TV. The usual movie/TV show parody played on the TV. After the TV segment was over, Lois announced that she had something special planned for Peter, telling him that he's going on a scavenger hunt for the day. Peter, being the man-child that he is, was immediately gung-ho about it. Lois then went upstairs and came back downstairs with a piece of paper that had writing inscribed onto it. Peter, without hesitation, immediately grabbed the list and ran off the front door, as he giggled like a little child who had gotten money to buy some ice cream. After Peter leaves the house, Lois walked to where the doorway was, and she had a sinister expression on her face while she steepled her fingers together. She was stifling bits of laughter under her breath, and some of the viewers stated that they even heard her murmur the words, "Yes, yes, it's all according to plan." Back to the story on the other hand. The screen went to black, like in most Family Guy episodes. Then it came back to the next scene. The next scene depicted Peter, shovel in hand, digging a hole near a highway. There seems to be little activity on said highway, with the only thing on the road being the Griffin family car. Peter is shown to be following the instructions on the map Lois gave to him. Peter dug through most of the dirt in search of an item that was supposedly listed on the small map. Eventually, he found the item after digging extensively. Peter uncovered this item and blew away some dirt that might have gotten on top of it. The item was revealed to be a small wooden shoebox. Contained within that small shoebox was a white ceremonial robe. Peter was confused as to why such equipment would be contained in the box, but was even more confused as to why a ceremonial robe was listed on the list. Peter initially called the whole thing off as a joke, but decided to play along with this made-up scavenger hunt. Without hesitation, he hopped into the car and proceeded to find the next item that was listed. The next item on the list led him to a dense forest-like setting. The forest had lots of trees, and some viewers claim that the only thing they heard during this was the hooting of owls and the hushed creaks courtesy of multiple crickets. The backdrop was described as having an eerie nighttime feel to it, as the entire forest was lit by the harsh light from the moon. Peter wandered throughout this vast land in search for the next item on the list. Peter was guided by the moonlight's trail, similarly to how baby sea turtles use the moonlight to return to the ocean. Unluckily for him, the moon's light was blocked off by a few clouds. This resulted in him accidentally bumping into a nearby tree. This further resulted in a strange object hitting Peter across the nose, causing it to bleed.
Ow! What the hell was that?
Peter yelled while holding the tip of his nose to stop the bleeding. The camera panned to show the object on the grassy plains. Although the object was visible as a black shadow, the moonlight slowly began to reveal what the mysterious object was. The moon finally struck the object with its light, and Peter was able to see exactly what had hit him. There, laying on the grass, was a long metal pole. The pole was described as having different sizes of rust on the surface of it, indicating that it was there for quite some time. It would have rusted completely had Peter not found it. Peter inched closer and grabbed the pole. He followed the moon's trail to the exit of the forest. Upon arriving at his car, he opened the side door and placed the pole gently on the back seat, along with the shoebox he had found earlier in the day.
Huh. That's it? That's all the items on the scavenger hunt?
Peter asked with suspicion in his voice. Again, Peter decided to call the whole thing off as a joke, and started the car engine in order to go home. However, while driving, Peter heard a loud growl coming out of nowhere. Peter, startled by the noise, immediately started looking around to see where the noise had come from. It turned out that the noise had started coming out of Peter's stomach. He seemed famished and dehydrated after that scavenger hunt Lois had sent him on.
I think I should stop by the clam for a little while to refresh. Hopefully Lois wouldn't notice.
Peter contemplated as he arrived at the main town. He stopped at his favorite bar, the Drunken Clam, in order to get himself some refreshments before calling it a day. When he pulled over at the driveway, he saw that, to his delight, the Clam was still open after hours. He entered the door, only to find that the entire bar was completely desolate. The only person that can be seen or heard at this hour was Jerome, who was packing up his things.
Hey Jerome, I would like the usual, please.
Peter said as he went to take his seat. Upon making himself comfortable on the foam-padded surface on one of the chairs, he noticed that Jerome was packing something out of Peter's sight.
Hey Jerome, what are you packing?
Peter asked. Jerome never said a word. The only known sounds from the bartender and owner of the Clam were the aggravated heaps of breath he was emitting as he continued to do what he was doing before Peter entered. Just then, Jerome spoke.
It's nothing, Peter. It's none of your business. By the way, here's your usual.
And with that, Jerome went further into the counter and placed a glistening cold mug of beer for Peter to indulge. As Peter happily drinks his beer, Jerome snuck out of the Clam without Peter even noticing, as he carried a small briefcase with him. Most of the episode was dedicated to Jerome walking down an empty sidewalk, wearily glancing back and forth to check if someone was following him. Just then, without sudden warning, Jerome stopped walking. The backdrop behind him depicted a dark, hollow alley. Slowly, with precious steps, he slowly made his way into the alley. There he was, surrounded by darkness, glancing around wearily as he did before. A strange noise began to emerge from its hiding place in the alley, the sounds of sandals making contact with the concrete pavement below them. The figure was described as wearing a brown coat, and spoke in a whispery kind of voice. The figure advanced towards Jerome, and started a conversation with him. This was how the conversation went.
Did he enter into your bar? Yes, he did. He's indulging himself in that delectable nectar.
For tomorrow, you got all your necessary equipment?
Yes.
Good. I'm saying that we give him a proper send-off. Deal or no deal?
Deal.
After this little conversation between the two, the screen went to black for a little while. The screen later came back with a first-person view of someone driving, possibly in Peter's point of view. The only thing that was visible was the interior of the car and Spooner Street, as it was showered with the glistening stars of the night sky. Peter was driving recklessly across the street, presumably due to the beer that he drank earlier. Eventually, it showed the car swerving into the driveway of the Griffin house as Peter got out. The first-person view from earlier ceased, and it showed Peter entering the house in a drunken stupor. It took him a while to get up to his and Lois's bedroom. As he got there, he drunkenly apologized to Lois for staying late. Lois, however, didn't respond to his apology. In fact, she never responded to him. All that was heard on her side of the bed was peaceful snoring. Peter, still in his drunken stupor, immediately slipped back into bed and slept peacefully through the entire night. The next few minutes of the episode were dedicated to a scene of Peter and Lois sleeping in bed, which, to be fair, was a bit boring for the viewers watching at home. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the scene immediately cuts to show the Griffin house during the daytime. Peter was still restfully asleep, but woke up with a loud yawn whilst stretching his arms. He turned over to Lois's side to wake her up. However, Lois never responded, similar to what had happened last night. Peter, unfazed by this, immediately got up and was ready to start his day. He went downstairs to go get breakfast. However, when he got there, he saw that no one was at the table. No Chris, no Meg, no Stewie, no Brian, no Lois. Nobody.
Huh. That's a little odd.
Peter said suspiciously.
There's no food on the table.
All of a sudden, a loud crash was heard, as well as the sounds of a car alarm being triggered. The sounds outside resulted in Peter immediately bolting out of the house faster than the speed of light, before inspecting the exterior of the car. Upon looking closer, he saw that one of the car windows had been shattered, and that the things inside, the box and the rusty pole, were missing. Peter was aghast at this, but since the suspect ran away before Peter bolted out, there was nothing Peter could do about it. Peter, upset about this apparent burglary, slumped down onto the living room couch and decided to watch the TV. As Peter was watching his usual broadcast channels, he heard something outside. The sound was described as the skidding of wheels that slowly began inching closer and closer towards the house. As Peter started noticing what was coming for him, a black, tall Jeep crashed through the house at an alarming speed. Peter ducked out of the way when this happened.
Hey, buddy! What the hell was that for?
Peter exclaimed with anger and shock. The driver of the Jeep didn't say anything, but he instead got out of the car. It took a while for him to step off of the vehicle and onto the floor of the Griffin house. The driver of the Jeep was described as wearing a black robe, with the hood of it covering their face.
Are you Peter Griffin?
The robed figure spoke in a raspy, yet audible tone of voice. Peter hesitates before answering it with a nervous, "Yes?"
I'm afraid you're gonna have to come with me,
the robed figure said.
Well, maybe I should. But I learned not to trust strangers, Peter contemplated.
Mr. Griffin, please. If you could just come with me. If you don't want to come, I'll make you by force,
The robed figure said in a stern voice.
Oh yeah? You in what army?
Peter sarcastically remarked towards the figure in a rude manner. Unfortunately for Peter, his question was answered. It was at that point that the robed figure put his fingers to his mouth, letting out a wolf whistle with his mouth and fingers, which resulted in two other people exiting out of the Jeep as well. They all were sporting the same black robe the figure was previously wearing. "Come with us, Peter. Our leader is awaiting you," the robed figures said in unison, as they reached their hands out to Peter in hopes of him eventually agreeing. Peter, though reluctant at first, decided to give in to the figures' orders. However, what the robed figures don't know was that Peter's surrender was all a ruse. As Peter was walking towards the figures, ready to come with them, he immediately yelled and pointed.
Hey, what's that over there?
The figures, oblivious to the ruse, looked to where Peter had pointed. When they turned to try and collect Peter, they saw that he had sprinted across the street, laughing cunningly. It took Peter a long time to get into the main town, where everything looked desolate. The streets were empty. No pedestrians were in sight of the sidewalk. The only audible sounds were the gentle breeze of wind and the clacking of Peter's shoes, stepping beneath the asphalt floor. Peter wandered aimlessly through the desolate street, trying to look for someone. Again, the runtime of the episode was dedicated to Peter peeking through the buildings to try and find someone. Alas, the buildings were empty as he checked. Even in the more crowded places like restaurants, bars, the clam included, stadiums, and more, are devoid of any residents. As Peter wandered the streets without any hope of finding anyone, the same black Jeep from before was roaring through the empty road. Peter, noticing the Jeep, immediately ducked into a bush. One of the robed figures was on top of the car, yelling into a megaphone. They were searching for Peter to come out of hiding, and they sounded really unhappy when doing so.
Peter Griffin, we're gonna say this once and we're not gonna say it again. Come out of hiding. We know you're out there.
The robed figure shouted into the megaphone. Peter waited for them to pass through the bush so that he could get away from these robed figures who are currently out to get him. Peter immediately got out of the bush and ran to the nearest hiding place, which was a construction site. In that construction site were unfinished walls and decorations that Peter hoped would help him hide from those figures. Peter managed to stay hidden in the terrain and the decor of the unfinished building until he heard the sound of a car stopping by and the click-clacks of shoes. Peter was confused over who was making those sounds until he started putting two and two together to realize that the robed figures had entered the building and that it was their Jeep that pulled over near the construction site. Peter, in a hurry, tried to escape before the figures cornered him. He tried to jump out of an unfinished window of the building, but had to abort when he saw how high the jump was. Peter let out a frustrated grumble as he ran down to the ground floor of the building. As he was nearing the exit, two of the robed figures jumped out from the shadows and tackled Peter to the ground.
Ah! Let go!
Peter exclaimed, trying to get the figures off of him.
No! We're never letting you go! You're seeing the leader, and that's final!
One of the robed figures yelled out in a stern voice. Peter, in a blind rage, angrily brawled with the figures that tackled him. Though successful in his attempt, another one of the figures emerged from behind, grabbing Peter in a headlock. Peter, still in his blind rage, angrily bit the figure's hand. The figure yelped and jumped back, landing onto the floor. Peter then loomed over the figure, whose hood was open, though the figure refused to show their face.
Who are you? And why are your buddies coming after me?
Peter angrily exclaimed as he raised his fist in the air, ready to give the figure a hard punch to the face. As Peter was getting ready to give the figure a knuckle sandwich, the figure turned around to reveal their face. It was Quagmire, looking frightened. Quagmire? Peter said in shock as he lowered his fist. Peter was shocked that one of his best friends would masquerade as a figure who was trying to hunt him down. This left Peter in a vulnerable state, a state which gave the other two figures the time to strike. First, one of the figures crept up at Peter and kicked him right in the heel, causing him to fall over. Next, another one of the figures immediately begins punching and kicking Peter all through the body, as the latter tries to desperately get off the ground. After this harsh beating, the robed figures then hold Peter by the arms. The camera shifts to Peter's perspective, as it shows Quagmire getting up and leaving the scene for a bit. During this scene, the viewers at home said that Peter was groaning in a weak voice, pleading for a Quagmire to come and save him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a wrench was seen. The wrench was described as being thrown towards the camera. Mind you that it was displaying Peter's POV. The wrench landed hard on Peter's forehead, knocking him out unconscious. The scenery of the scene was now described as blurry, with the figures in Peter's perspective being depicted as gray lights, standing out of a much brighter light. The screen immediately cut to black, in tandem with Peter shutting his eyelids, letting the concussion from that wrench overwhelm him. This is where things take a turn for the worse in this story. This is where the episode reaches its climax, the part where the title of the episode gains a new context and meaning for the viewers at home. The screen returned back to normal, with an extreme close-up of Peter's eye. The eye slowly began to open, before the camera cut to show Peter's perspective. Peter seemed to be blinded by a glimmering light emitted by the sky. The camera immediately cuts back to Peter's eye, as soft streaks of blood begin trailing down his face. The shot begins to widen slowly as it shows, at first, Peter's face, where it revealed that there was a huge gash on his forehead from where the wrench had hit him. The camera also showed his perspective, as he looked up into the sky. The sky wasn't a red one like in those creepypasta stories, but it was a vivid streak of orange and purple lights, almost similar to a sunset setting, commonly used in romance films. The shot also showed that Peter was strapped to a large wooden table via ropes tied to the legs of said table. The table was on top of what appeared to be a stage. The camera went back to Peter's point of view again, only this time his head was tilting from left to right. On his right was a blank setting with a field of grass, surrounded by that vivid sunset backdrop, but on his left was something that shocked him. There was an entire crowd of people, all sporting the same black robes. They were sitting still and quiet on what appeared to be benches, not saying a word.
Hey! Where am I?
Peter said with a stuttering fear in his voice. The entire crowd angrily and rudely shushed him in unison. Once again, the entire episode was dedicated to minutes of the crowd, sitting in silence in front of Peter. The silence was occasionally broken by Peter trying to crack jokes to pass the time, despite none of the figures actually responding to the jokes. Suddenly, without warning, the entire crowd of people stood up from their seats. They all started turning their heads to something behind them. Peter, startled by this sudden reaction, also glanced at where they were staring. The camera shifted to the front of the area, where it was revealed that the crowd was looking towards another mysterious figure. However, what made this figure stand out from among the crowd was that they were wearing a white robe. This wasn't a normal robe, mind you. This was the same white robe that Peter had found earlier in the episode. The entire scene was still silent, but the viewers at home claimed that they heard soft murmurs and whispers. One of them was someone saying, "Our leader's here." Slowly, the figure in the white robe dawdled steadily to the front of the area. Eventually, they managed to reach the front. The very first instinct that the figure did was get on top of the stage, then proceeding to where the table was. The figure stared down at Peter, as the latter looked in horror.
Who are you?
Peter stuttered in fear. The figure said nothing. The only audible thing from them was breathing. Not hyperventilating nor breathing slowly, but breathing calmly and happily. The figure raised its hand without warning, resulting in 4 robed figures rising from their seats and rushing over to the table. When they got there, they stood like still soldiers. They stood still like soldiers, awaiting orders from a drill sergeant. "Restrain him," the figure in the white robe stated, following the white-robed figure's demand. The 4 black-robed figures rushed over to where Peter's hands and feet were. They put their hands over the limbs to restrict movement.
Hey! What's going on? Let me go!
Peter retaliated harshly to the figures holding him down. "Oh, don't worry. They'll let you go. After I dispose of you," the white-robed figure assured Peter in a deep, yet sarcastic tone of voice. "Wait here. I'd like to make a public announcement," the figure said, no longer sounding sarcastic. The white-robed figure went to the near end of the stage, where a black-robed figure went up and handed the former a megaphone. The figure started delivering a speech to the crowd. The sentence that follows is a brief transcription of the speech. "For years on end," points to Peter on the table, "this incompetent, selfish, dim-witted man has tortured us. Day by day, night by night, season after season. We all endured his actions. He made bad decisions. He committed crimes against humanity. He's rude, selfish, and furthermore, he ruined our lives just by walking on this earth. Well, today is a very special day. A different day, you might say. The day we put this man out of our misery. The day we will never forget. The day Peter Griffin dies." Upon hearing that final sentence, Peter felt his heart sink to the bottom of his stomach, like a dense rock in a pond. The camera shifted to Peter as his eyes widened in shock, his mouth agape upon hearing that final sentence. At this point, the figure gave the megaphone away before making their way towards the table.
Look, pal, I don't know who you are, but what's the beef between you and me?
Peter angrily interrogated the figure. "The beef between you and I? I think you mean the beef between me and you, the figure said. Do you even know who I am? Peter shook his head in fear. During this scene, very soft piano music starts to play in the background.
What do you mean there's beef between you and me?
Peter asked with confusion. I guess you're not ready to handle this sort of reveal, Peter, the figure said with a soft chuckle. Then, with gentle movement, the figure moved their hands over to the hood covering their face. The soft piano music began to swell as the figure did so. Slowly but steadily, the figure uncovered their hood in front of the whole crowd and for Peter to see. It was none other than Lois, sporting that white robe. This comes with an expression of pure malice as she loomed over Peter with an overconfident smile.
Lois?
Peter stuttered with shock and horror on his face.
But why?
Because me and this whole entire town are sick and tired of your shenanigans. We can't take it anymore. I should have listened to my father. He was right about you all this time. You're not my husband. You're a sick, manipulative sociopath! A sociopath, for God's sake! Well, no more. Never again will you lay your fat appendages that you call feet onto this earth.
Lois angrily berated Peter. She then pointed to the four figures holding Peter down to the table as she gave out more sets of commands for them to follow. Tighten your grip on him. Make sure he doesn't escape, Lois said to them, obeying their master's orders. They tightened their grip onto Peter's hands and feet. This was when things truly got out of hand. Lois went over to the table as she started digging through her robe for something. After what seemed like seconds of this, she managed to get something out of her robe. She pulled out a knife from her robe, possibly taken from the kitchen of the house.
Don't worry, Peter. This won't hurt a bit,
Lois said as she gently placed the knife onto Peter's shirt, onto the area where Peter's abdomen should be. Then, with smooth hands, like a sushi chef cutting a piece of sashimi from a fish, Lois slowly started to cut into Peter's flesh. She didn't stab and cut the skin like a psychopath you would see in most horror movies. She slowly guided the knife through Peter's shirt, cutting it and tearing through the thick skin. She continued to cut into the skin until they were carved into a shape that resembled a capital I. With careful hands like a surgeon, she dug them right onto the multiple cuts and opened it as if they were a closet door, revealing Peter's digestive system, the small and large intestines, the stomach, and the liver. As Lois was doing this, Peter started wincing in agonizing pain. He desperately and unsuccessfully tried to fight back against his captors as Lois continued with her torture. First, she got to Peter's small intestine. She removed the organ out of the body with one yank and proceeded to do the same with the large intestine. She then passed the lengthy organs to the crowd of robed figures, like it were a game of pass the parcel, until she got to one of them. One of the figures took the organs and threw them into an oil drum, with fire jetting out of it. Peter watched in horror as the organs burned into that fiery pit.
Lois, what was that for?
Peter stuttered, with fearful heaps of breath. Lois went over to the table where Peter's head was laying. She lowered her head down to Peter's own, as she grasped the table with her blood-soaked hands.
To hasten your death, honey,
Lois said with a quiet and whispery tone of voice.
Lois, you're being unreasonable. I know you don't like me for what I did back in the past and in the present, but think about all the times I helped you.
Peter tried to assure her in the hopes that Lois would listen. and spare his life.
But Peter, you did help me.
Lois said in a soft voice at first.
You helped me by making me lose my sanity dealing with your nonsensical bullshit!
Lois angrily screamed at Peter's face. While doing so, she angrily banged the table with her hands, with each pound causing the table to vibrate and shake violently.
This is why I assembled this cult. I hate cults against you, Peter Griffin. Hopefully we can contain you in a place that is reserved for the most deserved,
Lois angrily explained to Peter.
The whole torture of me pulling your intestines was only the beginning. Now, it's time for the big moment that we all have been prepared for.
Lois stepped off of the stage and started to walk away.
You guys stay here. I'll be right back,
Lois said before turning around.
That goes for you too, Peter.
The screen turned black like in most Family Guy episodes before it. After a few seconds of this darkness, the screen went back to the crowd staring blankly at Peter. The bottom of Peter's body had a huge gash in it from where Lois had ripped his intestines. The 4 figures from before were still holding him down to the table, their grasps tighter than earlier. Peter, on the other hand, was groaning in pain while taking heaps of breath in an attempt to stay alive. Peter tried cracking a few jokes in an attempt to brighten the mood a bit, but the crowd just continued to stare at him without any response. Pretty soon, without sudden warning, the figures then turned their heads around to Lois, who was carrying something in her hands. She made her way back up to the stage and headed straight to the table without saying anything.
Lois, what have you got there?
Peter asked fearfully. Lois ignored his question, but did give him a subtle little hint for Peter to acknowledge.
It's something that you've collected in that little scavenger hunt I gave you,
Lois uttered in his ear. Following this, Lois went to the front of the stage again, with another speech to give to her members.
My members, today has all been led up to this shining and glittering moment of truth. After 17 years of never-ending torture brought to life by this man's incompetence, his reign of terror is finally crumbling down.
Lois monologued to the figures. The figures gave a round of applause, and they were even heard loudly cheering. After this little speech, Lois once again advanced towards the table with intentions of killing Peter for good. Remember her little hint that she gave earlier to Peter in that whispery voice? It turns out that she came back with the long metal pole from the scavenger hunt earlier. Slowly and steadily, she aimed the pole near the area where Peter's mouth should be.
Lois, what are you gonna do to me?
Peter exclaimed in a frightful tone as he started hyperventilating. Lois never answered Peter's question. Instead, the camera shifted to Lois's face, as it featured a big smile, with multiple rows of her teeth showing, and constricted pupils. The viewers at home described the next scene as weird and kind of trippy looking for some. A small montage of short clips start to fade in and out of the screen. The clips, though very brief, were depicted as the multiple activities Peter had committed throughout the show. These activities range from his welfare fraud, from Death Has a Shadow, to the modern episodes, with the cutaway gags included in also. The montage also included Lois's negative interactions with Peter throughout the show too. As this montage plays out, Lois's face started to change. Her smile started to widen largely in tandem with her pupils, which had started to constrict even more. Although no one in the crowd noticed Lois's disturbing face transformation, Peter was the one who stood out in the crowd. Peter tried to wriggle his way out of the table, but his confines were too tight. The fact that the robed figures were still holding him down didn't exactly help matters.
Lois! No!
Peter screamed.
Yes, Peter Griffin. Yes!
Lois said, with a slithery hiss, almost similar to a snake.
Please, Lois! I'm sorry, okay? Please forgive me! I'm sorry for all those bad things! I regret doing all those things that made you mad! Please, give me another chance!
Peter wailed, followed by a loud sobbing.
Peter. I would have accepted your apology, but you're too late,
Lois said, followed by an evil chuckle. Lois then brought the pole further away from Peter's mouth as she chuckled sinisterly. Peter, already aware about what's coming, immediately belted out one final scream.
No! Lois!
Stab. The whole screen was covered in the familiar darkness when that loud sound came bellowing out of the TV speakers. From the multiple households the broadcast was taking place in, the sound reverberated throughout many homes. The screen immediately returned with a close-up of Lois's face. Fortunately for the disturbed, her face had lost that sinister grin and constricted pupils from earlier, replaced with a frown and shut eyelids. Her head tilted away from the table, almost as if she averted her glare from what was on it. Slowly, one by one, she opened her eyes and tilted her head forwards to observe what was on the table. There, lying on the table, was the body of Peter. The pole had been jabbed right through his mouth and stopped short right at the bottom of what little remains of his digestive system. Peter was still alive, but just barely. Peter was coughing up small amounts of blood as his body was trying to regurgitate the pole out of him. Due to the small, multiple parts of rust on the pole, Peter was also showing signs of a tetanus infection. Despite his body's best efforts to remove the pole, the bacteria suggested otherwise. It started ravaging through Peter's body, evident by the guy having painful muscle spasms and breathing problems. Eventually, poor Peter Griffin slowly closed his eyes and stopped moving. Lois was shocked by this, but during Peter's episode on the table, she refused to help him, only to respond when her husband's motion ceased. She inched towards her dead husband, grabbing the pole sticking out of Peter's mouth. Before she lifted the corpse up into the air, she told the four figures to stand back from the body. She sliced the ropes of the table with the same blood-covered knife after that, freeing the deceased Peter. She proceeded to lift the corpse above her head as the gash in the latter's abdomen started trailing large amounts of blood. By the look on Lois's face, she felt a sort of power surge through her body. Soon, that familiar wide-open grin and constricted pupils returned as she lifted the corpse up into the air.
My members, let us embrace the death of this stupid fat man and hope that God will guide his soul into the fiery gates of hell where he rightfully belongs!
Lois announced to the cult members in a bombastic and sadistic voice. With that speech out of the way, Lois lifted her head up to the sunset-like backdrop as she cackled evilly. In tandem with Lois's sinister cackles, the rest of the cult members started to laugh hysterically and sadistically at Peter's death. The vivid sunset-like backdrop slowly faded into a gray, monotonous color. All of a sudden, raindrops began pouring onto both Lois and the crowd. The rain didn't seem to affect them in any capacity. They just continued to laugh evilly. Some of the blood leaking out of Peter started to get diluted with the rainwater, causing them to leak down onto Lois's face, splattering all over her as it did so. The camera immediately cut to the back of the entire area, where the horrid laughter of the crowd and Lois continued on and on. The sound echoed throughout most of the homes hosting this graphic broadcast. As the sadistic laughter continued, 2 lines of text appeared on the screen, most of them read, created by Seth MacFarlane. I really hope you're happy. Without warning, many of the TV sets that the viewers owned suddenly shifted to black. The Family Guy credits played as usual, as if nothing unusual had ever happened. After the credits were over and done with, an Adult Swim Coming Up Next bumper appeared, as it continued ahead with its regular programming blocks. The episode was met with generally polarizing reviews with multiple people. Some praised the episode for its writing, direction, and story. Others were left utterly speechless. Even the people who boycotted the show for leaving Peter Griffin in, despite their demands for him to be killed off, were left speechless. Later in the day, during the local news, the reporters had a field day. Journalists were writing stories about the broadcast interruption. Basically, this unaired episode was the talk of the town and the continent. Soon, word of mouth spread over to Fox headquarters. Once the executives there heard about Seth and his colleagues airing the episode without their permission, they were livid. A few days later, they asked if Seth could come into their office first thing in the morning. The former was more alarmed than happy to oblige. When he got there, the Fox executives were rambling and ranting at him for airing an episode that they deemed too far for their standards, without getting the green light from them. However, Seth objected, saying that it wasn't his fault for writing such an episode. He stated that it was the fans who wanted this and should be the ones receiving the blame for pressuring him. Eventually, the meeting lasted only a few hours. When Seth exited out of the studio, he looked glum. When his closest colleagues asked if something was wrong, Seth stated that they had to remake the episode to fit the executives' demands, and to make sure that it fit their standards and practices. Today, the episode has been reworked into a much more well-known episode of Family Guy. The episode was heavily altered into what it was previously, keeping its documentary-type feel in the same behind-the-scenes format, while the Twilight Show-esque narrator was replaced with the show's comedic caricature of James Woods. The episode's title was also changed. The title went from The Big Goal to Inside Family Guy. However, there's a subtle little hint of The Big Goal present in the reworked episode. That is the plot point where Peter's fired off of the show and replaced with a comedic caricature of David Spade. The episode even had a callback to it, where they disguised Peter's firing from the set as an episode where he's killed off and replaced. The episode officially aired in October of 2016, and the rest was history. And that was The Big Goal, written by Affan Jamsari. Review time. Okay, I'll start with the positives to this story. There is very few. Peter did act like himself. He was somewhat in character. The grammar was good and the structuring was good. Those are 2 pretty small positives, but I'll count them anyway. But that's pretty much it. Affan, I'm only saying this because I want to be completely honest, as honest as can be, and I hope my opinion helps. This was god-awful. This was what, like, from the beginning to the episode itself to all of the filler to how long-winded it was to the very end, this is abominable. I'm I'm speechless. This was very bad. Um okay, I'm gonna go on with what exactly is wrong with the story. For starter, I'm gonna start off with how Seth MacFarlane is portrayed here. 3 big problems. First of all, Seth MacFarlane stopped writing for Family Guy after season 4. So, if he stopped writing, why did he go to Fox and hijack a TV station to broadcast this episode? I'm pretty sure Seth MacFarlane wouldn't do that ever, because that is a crime. He can get in much bigger trouble than just a stern talking to from the Fox execs, I would think. And not to mention, you're telling me that Seth got threats from critics in letters. And he read those threats and he was like, "Oh, I'm getting threats from people because I'm not killing off my main character, which I shouldn't do anyway. I'm just gonna take it as a joke." He just does a Mickey Mouse walk down the street. Speaking of walking down the street, he's publicly shunned by people over a cartoon. Really? He's like, people are pretending that he doesn't exist, and like he's getting shamed in public because he didn't kill off a cartoon character. You are joking, right? You have to be joking. People don't like this is so unbelievable. Like there's not an ounce of believability in this story. Like, again, I'm speechless. I have so much to say about this story, but I have to take long pauses every time. That's how bad this is. But then we get to the episode itself. See, at first I thought the beginning was intriguing, and then it got ruined. See, like, I thought at first, oh, it's a scavenger hunt. That's not too far off from something that would happen in a Family Guy episode. And then when Peter goes on the hunt, part of the story is, like, completely contradicted when he goes into certain spaces, and in those places he gets these members sort of give him the tools right there, in a way. Like, why are they, like, if he's going on a scavenger hunt, why are they just gonna give him the tools anyway, first of all? And second of all, why is it so many instances in when he's going to other settings, there has to be an over description of how the place looks? Like, I'm gonna give an example real quick. The part where he's in the forest. Let me go to it real quick. The figures, blah, blah, blah. Skip. And... Okay, the next item on the list led him to a dense forest-like setting. The forest had lots of trees, and some viewers claimed that the only thing they heard during this was the hooting of owls and the hushed creaks courtesy of multiple crickets. The backdrop was described as having an eerie nighttime feel to it, as the entire forest was lit by the harsh light from the moon. Peter wandered throughout this vast land in search for the next item. He was guided by the moonlight's trail, similarly to how baby sea turtles use the moonlight to return to the. Do you see my point here? There's an over description. It feels like filler. It feels like such massive filler. You can easily shorten that to just, it was a dense forest like setting. You could just leave it off at that. Or if you want to get more descripted, it was a dense forest like setting that was accompanied by the hooting of owls and sounds of crickets, as well as the dim lighting from the moon. That's good enough. You didn't have to get this overly descriptive. But then we get to the part where he's actually killed by the cult members. He's put in there, and there's like a humongous coliseum of people. Oh, something I didn't mention before it gets to that part. Like, there's a mention where the sky wasn't a red one like in those creepypasta stories, but it was a vivid streak of orange and purple. Listen, if you're gonna mention the word creepypasta in your story, make it, like, make the story say about a creepypasta writer or a narrator or a lost creepypasta in and of itself. Don't do it in a story that you're trying to make believable, because that is definitely going to take away a lot of believability. There's a coliseum of people, and notice how beforehand the entirety of Quahog was empty, minus Lois and Peter and Jerome and some of the figures. Are you telling me that all of Quahog, every single person in Quahog, knows exactly who Peter is, and they had the time to get together in this coliseum, this big crowd, and watch him die like a cult? You're telling me that Quahog is just 100% crazy, 99% crazy people? Yeah, I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. Another thing that really irked me is the wrong person was chosen to be the cult leader. Lois is just as awful of a person as Peter is. I get it. Peter's a bad person. He deserves karma. Okay. First of all, write the karma well. Write it to be fitting. Write it in a way where, like, it makes the reader feel like he deserves it. But also choose a leader, someone that should kill him, that actually, like, is a victim, per se. Don't choose Lois. She is a drug addict. She starred in pornography while raising several children. She raped Peter to conceive one of her kids. I can go on and on and on and on. Oh, also, let's not forget she treated Meg like crap, just like Peter did. And you're telling me, like, it's completely fine for, like, this is justified? Like, I'm supposed to feel for her in this situation? Because I don't. She's a horrible person. If anything, she should be in there with Peter. Like, if she deems Peter this bad. Like, pick the right person to be the, like, murderer. And another thing, all of this is just extremely long-winded. You can shorten it. You don't have to. I already said that, didn't I? Like, I hate the story so much that, like, I'm forgetting what I said beforehand. That's, anyway, when we get to the murder portion of the story, there's just as much filler as there was in the setting, mentioned in a few parts. Like, Peter was showing signs of a tetanus infection. He was still alive, just barely. He was coughing up small amounts of blood as his body was trying to regurgitate the pole. Despite his body's best efforts to remove the pole, the bacteria suggested otherwise. It started ravaging through Peter's body. I don't need to know about the bacteria! He died! Okay, you can leave it there. He died! You can just say he died. You don't have to put this over description in several parts. And then there's the ending with the news reports, which makes it less unbelievable. Less believable. And also, why did the Fox execs are kind of being hypocritical here too? Because Stewie is Enciente or whatever it was called. Remember that? Or Herpy the Love Sore? Or the one with Quagmire's sister getting abused by that guy, and in his speech to her to help her get better, like, he literally tells her she's not a real woman in that? You're telling me that this is too far? That this is too far? Wait a second. I just realized throughout all it was Adult Swim. This was aired on Adult Swim, not Fox. So if this was on Adult Swim, why is Seth hijacking Fox's station? I can't do this anymore. 2 out of 10. This was horrible. Now, Affan, I'm not trying to discourage you from writing. In fact, I encourage you to keep writing and keep improving, because the best way to improve upon your writing is by keeping it up. Like, keep writing as much as you can, and you'll eventually come up with something pretty good. Again, keep in mind, I wasn't doing this to hurt your feelings. I just wanted to be honest. But with that being said, this is simply my personal opinion. We all have our opinions regarding these pastas. What did you think of the pasta? What would you have done to improve upon it? I need a drink. I need some Fanta. And as always, I will see you all in the next narration. I love you all. Bless you all.